migrants actually violent? And are they really taking our jobs? It's easy to stereotype people we don't know. That's why migrants and refugees are frequent victims of influence operations. And these tactics work more often than we care to admit. Good evening, my name is Maia Mazurkiewicz, and welcome to the Anatomy of Disinformation. One of the main disinformation narratives we've seen over the years involves migration. No matter where we live, the us versus them angle is constant, and it deeply impacts our attitudes towards others. The biggest problem now is that the hate speech that originates online is spilling into the real world, with more and more acts of violence towards targeted groups. All over the world, we're seeing people become increasingly hostile towards refugees and migrants. Fear and manipulation are making us forget our commitment to human rights. Do we really understand who's behind the messaging and why there is suddenly so much fake news about people who need our help? We'll talk about that with our first guest.
Rachel Gilman, Director of Intelligence, Global Disinformation Index. She is a former intelligence analyst with extensive experience at TadaWeb, New Knowledge, and the US Department of Defense. Ms. Gilman specializes in computational disinformation analysis and the multidisciplinary intelligence methodologies for threat assessment.
Rachel, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us straight from London.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And today we're talking about migration, and disinformation around this topic is nothing new. However, recently we see more and more violence coming into the streets as well, especially in the UK.
Yes, we've had two really, I think, important incidents. Last year we had the Southport riots fomented around information voids, and carrying on from that, we have protests around immigrants and asylum seekers staying in hotels around the UK, where far-right activists want them removed from the hotels and removed from the country.
And do you see the connection with disinformation around the topic and the far-right movement around this?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of disinformation, and it is consistent tactics that we see across the world. But in this particular case, it's a lot of great replacement theory, other conspiracy frameworks, and a lot of information from foreign countries that is laundered through Telegram, X, and other types of alternative media.
We saw the issue already back in 2015, but now there is more and more influence operations around the topic.
We have seen it in Canada, we've seen it in the US, we see quite a lot of it in Germany. We've had issues in Ireland, and some of these are really tightly tied to online disinformation spilling out into the street and creating offline harms.
And who is really building these narratives and spreading the influence operations? Is it Russia, or you also see other actors?
So Russian is the most active foreign amplifier. In Germany's information space, they have a lot of clone site operations like Operation Doppelganger, but far-right ecosystems are also sort of laundering this information and bringing it into mainstream media with ongoing headlines and consistent anti-immigrant content.
And one of the main emotions that we see out there is obviously the fear, right?
Definitely. In the case of the UK, we see a lot of language that say things like "stop the invasion," "white Britons are being replaced," "we have to defend our girls," and all of this is designed to fuel hate, to distract from real solutions, and honestly to rile people up to get them to the ballot box in your favor.
And the same thing is happening in the US. And in there also one of the
same
amplifier is it's not only foreign, right? Because recently disinformation, we see that it's not only in the foreign actors, but also from the internal space.
It's definitely also from the internal space. In addition to being domestically laundered, reworded, and put onto platforms that might not have sanctions or might not be called state or FEMI, it's also put into main headlines. We currently see it popping up in public policy. And in addition to that, we have platforms that push these kinds of narratives algorithmically.
Who mostly benefits from this disinformation? You already named platforms, but are there the main ones?
So we obviously the knowns. There's quite a lot of information like this on X and other types of alternative media. But I think where we consistently see unmitigated, slow to act when this kind of stuff happens is Telegram.
And we're seeing there, I guess, two kind of ways of understanding who benefits from disinformation. So one thing is through amplifying. Different platforms are obviously gathering money because it makes clicks, right? And people are clicking on it. And on the other side, people are changing their attitudes. And already talked about violence, and we already talked as well of how people change to vote. So do you see that the migrant narratives, for example, are being amplified more during the electoral campaigns?
They're definitely amplified during electoral campaigns. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there's constantly an electoral campaign, right? And so because this is a broader ecosystem, it's pretty much become consistent, and it's bundled together with sort of anti-democratic narratives like we're no longer a democracy, or population replacement is underway, or this is a global conspiracy of elites. That kind of stuff. And so it carries over so that even if your country isn't in an electoral process, you're promoting those narratives in a country that might be your ally or neighbor.
And more often, there's an issue also with the Ukrainian refugees. And in general, right, migrants are very often, kind of changed or mixed with the refugees. So people that need our help and that very much work on the geopolitical levels as well of the security. So do you see that Russia also used those narratives in terms of kind of win, for example, the conflict in Ukraine?
Yes. So we have particularly seen that in the UK, where the UK population had very open arms for Ukrainian migrants, especially at the beginning of Russia's war in Ukraine. And over time, we see the rhetoric turning to Ukrainian refugees are being treated better than British citizens. They're getting more. British citizens are going without so that we can spend our money on this. And that then extends to all other types of migrants and asylum seekers.
Very similar to the narratives we see, for example, in Poland. Have you been seeing that the same narratives are actually coming in the different countries as well?
Yes, the narrative, the playbook is pretty standard. These people are coming to take over. The reasons might be different. They're coming to take over because they're angry with us. They're coming to take over because they want to create a caliphate. They're coming to take over because they're trying to draw us into a war with Russia. There's many, many, many reasons why, but it's always the same, that they're coming to do us harm.
And do you think that the governments already realized that that's the threat for security, and that are they doing enough?
So I think that this is a really difficult place for governments, right? I think that we currently treat anti-immigration narratives as sort of a niche problem, but it's not niche. It runs across civic integrity altogether, right? It's framed along with anti-press, anti-government, global conspiracies, and it's directly tied to how governments need to react to public health, to community safety, and to basic understanding of factual and not factual information that's being put into the ecosystem.
Do we need more strategic communication, for example, on the issue? What do you think would work?
So I do think that it's a lot of different issues that we have to work on. But in the UK, for instance, in the Southport attack, we had an information void, right? So the UK government and police legally withheld reasons and identity and, demographic information around the violent perpetrator of those murders, and hostile actors filled the vacuum. And that led to literally weeks of protest and riots and all kinds of really tangible public harm. I think since then they've made the decision to try to minimize those information voids. But how do we align laws that were made before sort of this information ecosystem existed with the needs of public safety and the rights of victims of crime?
Raising awareness definitely strengthens the resilience of the society, and that's what we should do. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
False migration narratives don't always emerge organically. They can be amplified by hostile actors looking to destabilize societies. By exploiting fear and mistrust, disinformation becomes a weapon to weaken social order and polarize us, often pitting public opinion against vulnerable communities.
Misinformation surrounding migration has become a global phenomenon.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
In the UK, the worst riots in more than a decade erupted after misinformation spread online about a mass stabbing in Southport. False reports claimed the teenage suspect was a Muslim asylum seeker. In reality, the accused, Axel Ruda Cubana, was born in Cardiff and is not Muslim. Yet, the narrative spread to millions of social media users, prompting mobs to attack mosques, hotels housing asylum seekers, and even local libraries.
We saw far-right mobilization from quite early on after the attacks in Southport. We started to see the circulation of misinformation that claimed that the attacker was of a Muslim background, that he was on a watch list for security services, that he was an illegal immigrant. And very quickly we saw the mobilization of anti-Muslim and anti-migrant hate online, including being driven by far-right actors.
In Poland, a viral video appeared to show migrants being secretly dumped in Kraków under the cover of night. However, the clip was actually a video of tourists returning to their hotel in the early hours. The claim, shared by a member of parliament, added fuel to anti-migrant rhetoric ahead of Poland's elections. In Spain's Torre Pacheco, unrest followed the assault of a 68-year-old pensioner by 3 young men of North African origin. While images of his injuries were real, unrelated videos claiming to show the attack spread widely online. One clip was traced back to Mexico in 2021, another to a separate Spanish town. A fake message from the town hall implying a confirmed link between an increase in immigration and violence also went viral, shared rapidly by the Russian state-sponsored media outlet Pravda. False migration narratives often spread faster than facts, and their impact can be devastating. Staying alert and questioning sources remains essential to understanding not only the events themselves, but also broader forces shaping public debate.
Do Ukrainian refugees really get to skip the line at the doctor's office? That's one of the main pieces of fake news being spread in my country, Poland. But it's not the only one. At a time when our security depends on Ukraine's fight for freedom, Polish attitudes towards Ukrainians are growing increasingly negative. Our next guest joins us to talk about that and more.
Paweł Prus, president and founder of the Zamenhof Institute. He is a lawyer, communications expert, and researcher of media and the infosphere. He served as a media policy expert at the Polish Institute of Legal and Economic Analysis. Mr. Prus was appointed to the Polish Foreign Ministry's Advisory Council for Resistance to Disinformation. He's a judge for the Virtuale Media Awards in the category of combating disinformation.
Paweł, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today we're talking about migrants and refugees, and especially I would like to talk with you about what is happening around disinformation and Ukrainian refugees. You've been working on the issue for quite some time.
Yes, since few years we noticed a bigger effort in making disinformation targeted to refugees and migrants in Poland in two main aspects. One aspect was the migration crisis on eastern border of Poland, the Belarusian-Polish border. And the second one, much more bigger, was a huge disinformation campaign targeted to Ukrainian refugees after the war, the Russian-Ukrainian war started on the full scale.
And so you were seeing the influence operations coming straight from Russia?
Yes, from Russia and Belarus, because in Poland we agree that we have three hostile status, which are where the biggest number of entities who are actors of disinformation in Poland. This is Russia, Belarus, and also China. But in these two cases, I mean, this migration crisis on Polish-Belarusian border and on this case with Ukrainian migrants, the most of the disinformation came from Russia and Belarus.
And I would like to focus probably most on the Ukrainian refugees, because that is something that, well, back in 2022, I think we as the Polish society were very proud of supporting the Ukrainian refugees. But at the same time, already the influence operations were happening on the ground, right, in our information space.
Yes. At the beginning, the help from Polish society was on unprecedented scale, and a lot of Polish people, engage in helping Ukrainian refugees. They were welcomed in Poland. They left their country and found a shelter here in Poland. But shortly after that, we noticed that there were special disinformation operations targeted especially Ukrainian women who came here to Poland with their children to find a shelter.
Exactly, and well, we may say that it's quite surprising, but it's not at the same time, as most of the refugees in Poland coming from Ukraine are women and children.
Yes, this is the biggest group, and we found that there was it was something like the part of the much bigger disinformation operation, but there were some false narratives about Ukrainian women specifically. On Facebook, we found many Facebook groups with names like Ukrainian women seeking for a man, or Ukrainian women meet a husband, and they were like fake posts with fake photos of Ukrainian women and text like I'm Ukrainian woman, I came to Poland and I'm looking for a husband. And it was well-targeted operation, because the target of this operation were Polish women. And after a few years, we found, and the research found this, that the social group in Poland, which lost their willingness to help Ukrainian the most, are young Polish women, which felt afraid and threatened by this situation.
Well, and we then definitely can see that this influence operations has worked. So what you've been mostly finding in there that was specific, because, well, if I'm a woman, right? So I could probably have been a target of this disinformation influence operation. Was there something specific that people, when they were looking at those images, they could say or verify that it's false?
No, but it's common that disinformation techniques are mostly not very sophisticated. It's more about the scale not about the quantity of the messages and the content. So this content, we found that, for someone who has a basic knowledge about fake news, AI, or disinformation, this content must be, suspicious from the first look. But it's all about the scale. If you show such a content, for example, for 100,000 people on Facebook, probably 30,000 found this content like a fake and do not believe it. But
so you're saying that it was AI or deep fake?
Okay. Because it was obvious. This content, these pictures, especially, it wasn't like very good. But the bigger group doesn't pay many attention to what they see on the Facebook. So they just believe in every word, every picture, every video they see on Facebook. So the big group can believe it.
So building the awareness is super crucial in here, right? That people actually are aware that those targeted influence operations are in there. So what actually our audience can do if they see those kind of narratives?
I think not only the audience of this show, but there are, in my opinion, there are 3 steps which are very important to tackle disinformation. First is building resilience by education. It's like with internet scams. If we get a knowledge about the threats from internet, about the scammers, that makes this social awareness. So the same is with disinformation. If we educate the people, if we start from a primary school, in case of children, it helps us to build, something like a social barrier to disinformation. The second thing is, I think, research. In Poland, we have a problem with trusted sources and with scientific research regarding disinformation. There are very few organizations, there are almost no academic research about disinformation, so that's the second problem. So I think that there are a lot of work to do to combat disinformation and to build this social awareness.
However, what is a problem is that the attitudes, as you already said as well, towards the Ukrainian refugees are dropping, right? They are dropping by 40% by the research that I've seen back from September 2024. I believe that right now they are even bigger. So that's a problem that also what we see on the streets, there's more and more violence towards the Ukrainian refugees, also towards women.
Yes, and what is specific here that this group where this attitude to Ukrainian dropped the most are young Polish people, especially young Polish women and girls. So I think that this is a direct effect of this disinformation, but also in general, this willingness to help Ukrainian is an effect of many different false narratives which are made in past 3 or 4 years in Poland.
And at the times of the war in Ukraine, that's where the support also towards the Ukraine is coming, right? If people are starting to dropping their attitudes towards the Ukrainian refugees, they are also starting to drop the attitudes towards the support for Ukraine in general.
Polish society helped Ukrainians on unprecedented scale, and something really strange happened in this past 3 years with our society and with Polish-Ukrainian relations.
Well, that's something to understand, that we are also being manipulated, something
to work on.
Definitely, and if we are understanding that we're being manipulated, that disinformation is changing our attitudes, maybe we're going to be more aware while going into the social media.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's find out what to do when you see what looks like disinformation online.
For internet trolls sponsored by different forces, every topic is raw material for memes, fakes, and disinformation. Remember, by sharing unchecked content, you're playing on their team. Check the source. Think about the motive. Decide whether to share. In 9 out of 10 cases, it's better not to.
It's only natural that in times of fear and uncertainty, we humans turn to the past for security and stability. That's why, even in times of prosperity, influence operations exploit our unconscious fears. So next time a news item about migrants makes you feel scared or anxious, remember to keep calm and think deeply.